used to play a couple though that I'd never heard anywhere else.
Oh, were they ones that Ivan Shantz did?
Probably learn some more. Ivan.
Listen, so you know, Last Thing on My Mind, right?
I don't know.
What is it? It's a lesson too late for the learning. You know that one, right? Made of sand, made of sand. In the blink of an eye, my soul keeps turning. In your hand, in your hand. Are you going away with no word of farewell? Will there be no trace with me on? Looking better didn't mean to be unkind. Though that was last thing on my mind. You for this, yeah.
Hello there! Hey, what's so important? What you got here that's worth living for?
You don't play correctly. So it's A and then B. Yep. A part. Right. You got it. Yep. Nice. Yeah. I stole this entire thing from Tab from BanjoHangout.com.
Nice. I gotta get in a flat again. Yeah, I told you I had this guy, Julian Davis, visiting, stayed with us. 18 years old. And he was then. He's older now, as we all are. It's like 20 now. And virtuoso flat picker. Just all from YouTube. Or mostly, he was, I mean, the thing about when you meet somebody who's an 18-year-old virtuoso, you realize they were also pretty darn good when they were 16. My buddy talks about the YouTube effect. No matter how good you are at anything, there's a 12-year-old on YouTube who's 1,000 times better than you. So I am here with my buddy, Jonathan Cranston, dear old pal who visited, well, didn't visit, we all drove up to the Yukon together. I mean, we spent much time in other facets, but that's sort of the unifying event. And we're here in New Haven. Is this New Haven, Connecticut?
Basically, North Haven.
North Haven.
Mm-hmm.
North Haven, Connecticut. Don't put that banjo away.
Hey.
It's been really good hanging out with you,
Yeah.
man. It's just a testament, I think, to what we've been talking about, that people of wide political divides can not just find common ground, but can navigate differences with grace and with humility, and find common ground.
Sure.
But don't have to compartmentalize and just
Yeah.
talk about fishing or the weather. We can talk about
Sure.
any number of topics,
Yeah.
even sensitive topics.
For sure. I'd say we have more common ground than not, though. You know, even probably me and you and Canone, whom you interviewed a couple of sessions ago, have more common ground than uncommon ground.
And even things
That's the
that
thing.
seem, you know, people stumble on topics on which it's tempting to draw a line in the sand. Like, and you know, we don't have to get into this, but like the whole Antifa idea is that some viewpoints, even though they presumably believe in freedom and all that, some viewpoints just need to be shouted down as kind of the Antifa perspective, that like certain authoritarian viewpoints, it's just a poison that does no good. And I just use that as an example, but everybody kind of, I think, is tempted to, in that perspective. Like, I tend to think, you know, I have a very big problem with the state and its meshing. And so my knee-jerk reaction when I talk to, or when I consider talking to, folks like you who, you know, at least in this present iteration,
Right.
are garden variety, left-leaning liberal.
Right.
I'm tempted to just think the things that you value require a kind of framework that I absolutely abhor, like the state and federal government enforcement and reappropriation of property, you know, taxation and distribution and all that sort of thing. But often, if you can hear people out and angle in on principles, you know, we both have a very strong desire for justice
Right.
and to protect the vulnerable.
Right.
And some things can be resolved. I think a lot of things can be resolved, in at least provisionally, in the lens of scale. You know, that I think are anathema for the federal government to do, I might be less disinclined for the states to do, more supportive for a city to do, and downright all aboard for a family to do.
Right.
You know? Like redistribution of, I mean, like I, you know, among friends and family, there's a lot of sharing and a lot of pressure to look out for people who are less fortunate. I think that's good. I'm just leery of combining that with the mighty arm of the U.S. federal government and its SWAT teams and drones and all that. Anyway,
Yeah.
I'm talking, and I'm here to, I want to hear a little bit more of some of what's on your mind, just by way of refresher, because I don't know how much of, I've been having some technical
Right.
difficulties with the camera and that, how much we got. But Jonathan grew up very formative years, 10 to 18, right?
Yeah.
In the Philippines. And grew up sort of, what would you say, first gen Mennonite? I mean, or
Probably.
whatever, like,
Yeah.
Mennonite influence.
No, it's hard to pinhole me into a denomination, because I was genetically and ethnically, I'm Free Methodist, which is a very small, it's not very small. If you ever go to like Greenville College in Illinois, or where's the other, Asbury College in Kentucky,
Okay.
there'll be a certain number of Free Methodists, along with a lot more just Methodists, and then Salvation Army is also part of it. It's part of the Wesleyan holiness movement from that tradition. And both of my grandfathers were pastors, and one was a missionary in the Free Methodist Church, and then all of our family. It's such a denomination that I would be afraid I'm marry who's from outside of the Free Methodist Church, because probably anyone I married within that church would be too genetically similar to me.
Yeah.
So that's what I am biologically, but so my folks did join a conservative Mennonite church when we were in Iowa, because my dad taught at Iowa Mennonite school for a while, and they were wonderful people. I appreciate their singing, I appreciate their desire for justice, their desire for the value they place on community, and you would appreciate them, a lot of them, for their wariness of the federal government.
Sure.
And the fact that they want their church and community to take on the functions that other people would want to give to the government. For instance, a lot of conservative Mennonites won't buy health insurance, because it's gambling. So they take care of each other in the community, which is a cool thing. We talked earlier on the lost footage, possibly, about it's kind of the drawbacks of being tied to the land in a community that's generation after generation. The fact that you can never leave your past behind, or your father's or your grandfather's past in the community. It was a nice thing, but then I was there from the ages of maybe 3 to 10, and then we went to Faith Academy in the Philippines, which the flavor of that place was pretty heavily Southern Baptist. And so, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
Anyway.
some of the viewers, have no idea
Right.
of all those denominational nuances.
Okay.
And others might have too much of an idea,
Right,
of it,
right.
like us, and think, oh, gee, here we go. But it's just interesting because it affects who you are, and it's
Right.
part of your culture,
Mm-hmm.
and good and bad. You carry some baggage. So we were talking a little bit about, I think a lot of people, kids in my age bracket whose parents, grandparents, or whatever background is largely missionary oriented.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of difficult questions of dealing with attitudes, colonial postures, and seeing, the good and the bad. Did you ever read that Chinua Achebe book, Things Fall Apart?
Yeah.
I think he handles that pretty delicately. Like, you see the missionaries for, the problems they brought, but also they were working with a group that had their own deep problems.
Okonkwo, the protagonist, if that's how you say that, his downfall really comes because of his own. Doesn't he murder a missionary at the end? Is that what gets him? Or he murders somebody?
Yeah. I think it's actually just his son or something like that.
Oh, is that? Oh, because his son.
There's something, but
It's been a while.
Yeah.
Right, but he. I think you're exactly right that they bring problems, but they also encounter problems, and they're as human as, at least as the people they're coming, which is a low bar to set. But
yeah, but I guess it's easy just as easy as it was, say, 50 years ago to just think, these wonderful Americans are bringing Christianity, long races or whatever. It's easy for them to say that, and it's easy now to look down on that. But I think the average sort of progressive American, if they had to face some of the practices of these peoples, would be a little shocked too. Like, I mean, a lot of these cultures have very patriarchal. So, you think the average American family's patriarchal, face down these other cultures, seriously strange rituals, some of which are, would be illegal and unethical in America. A lot of marring of one's body, particularly the young folks. You know what I'm saying?
I do know what you're saying, and I mean, I think there's like genital mutilation, for instance, in small pockets of the Muslim world.
I mean, that one's often referred to, but I mean, a lot of rites of passage, particularly like male rites of passage that I've read about, are things that would not be legal in America, whether they're just, I mean, we're talking about a society here, allowed to ride a bike without a helmet.
I guess I'm not.
But anyway, that's not what we're here to talk about.
No. No, I'm not. So if the thrust is that the people to whom the missionaries came weren't living in perfect societies beforehand, I mean, that's not it doesn't say anything for the missionaries. If somebody has a problem and you come to them and there's anything wrong with your methods, now I'm not putting the missionaries on trial right now,
sure,
but if there's something wrong with your methods, you can't argue in favor of your methods that the problem you were trying to solve was so bad.
No.
Yeah.
No, I don't think it's so much a defense of anybody's methods.
Right.
As simply, things are more complex than it's easy, and from a distance to just say, oh, these colonial white people, they just kind of showed up and ruined everything. Well,
no, yeah, of course. Yeah. I mean, I would never argue that there was a perfect society that missionaries came to and messed up. I think if some people would hold that view, and I think that would be that's a pretty childish view of the interaction between cultures. It's never one way. I mean, there's a power differential. When there's a real difference in power, then there's problems in this culture and there's problems in that culture. That consideration is sort of eclipsed by the fact that one culture is holding all the cards in a particular situation and the other is being subjugated. So, for instance, if we try to make if we kind of deify the plains in or the Native American tribe, that's a fool's errand. I mean, they were what they were, products of their environment. So were the Europeans. The problem there, the tragedy there, came from the inequality of the forces that were meeting.
Sure.
If they'd been on an even playing field in terms of technology and organization, then maybe we could have the talk about who had moral superiority. But that's not even even something to think about once one side has just obliterated the other. I don't know.
Yeah, and I guess that's kind of comes full circle to my leeriness of big government. You know, basically what we were saying is it's impossible to even discuss whether the settlers were right because they had so much more power.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm saying about the government. It's impossible to discuss whether the federal policies are right because they have such enormous power. You know, the modern U.S. military-industrial complex and police state, which is, I mean, even just in the last 10 to 15 years, talking about local police forces having SWAT equipment.
Yeah.
I mean, there's two factors that have driven that. One has been veterans joining police forces, and so bringing training and tactics and possibilities into local police forces. And then the other has been just, you know, 20 years of this so-called war on terror, producing this enormous surplus of, you know, equipment that's sort of shuffled off on. And suddenly you have a local police force that's full of people that are used to, you know, fighting Al-Qaeda and equipped with the equipment of, you know, taking out a small nation. And this is the organization that your average leftist, and really, honestly, most Republicans as well, are looking to solve problems.
Yeah.
That's a problem for me.
Well, that's the problem for defund the police people. Defund the police, I'll side with, you know, President Obama, who said, you know, you all are, you all have your hearts in the right place, but that's a problematic slogan because you have to have a whole paragraph of explanation to say why no, you're not actually gonna just take, you know, leave these kids and let people beat them up. That's not what you mean at all. But
that's not what everybody means.
Yeah.
And often, like most slogans, nobody really knows what they mean or what they want. They have sort of feeling about it. I mean, there's a tradition, for instance, in Britain of police being unarmed. It fits with the idea of sacrifice, and the idea of training, and the idea of them taking on more risk.
Yeah.
It's interesting, this question of police. Just this evening, the Bundys. I don't know, you talked about the
Clifton Bundy.
Yeah.
Ammon
and Cliven, Cliven, whatever. So they were arrested today for not wearing masks in court or something like that. But a huge swath of sort of right-wing America would be, you know, ardent Bundy supporters, and that puts them squarely on the other side of the law and order crowd.
Right.
And so I don't know, I guess all that's simply to say that these things aren't quite as, you know, compartmentalized as people pretend, and that if you listen to the mainstream or the main non-stream, you know, whatever secondary conservative sources, one would get the idea that it's, you know, the law and order side or all these lefty anti-police sides, but it's a lot more complex.
I find the case of the Bundys interesting, and I'm going to try an argument here, and I haven't heard it other places, and we'll see if it falls flat. But the Bundys are the recipients of the federal government's arm of oppression until they got into the place where they like where they are, and now they say no more arm of oppression. But there's no way they would be ranching on that land as you know, European Americans without the governments coming in and putting down the Sioux and Comanche. On behalf of people like that, if the horse soldiers had just left it to the settlers, the Comanches would have eaten their lunch. I mean, come on.
I don't know any of the specifics of it, but
anyway, but
I hear where you're coming from.
the idea is that the long arm and brutality of the federal government put them where they are, and now it's silly. It's a blinkered view of history. My problem with many conservatives that say, "Look, I have what I got through my hard work." No, every story anyone ever tells goes back to the beginning of time. No one in the world has what they have through the sweat of their brow. They may have more, they may have less, but all of us are the products of history.
Sure, but if you take that can be used, the old Obama, you didn't build that.
I'm
yeah. I get it.
Yeah.
Everybody that did all this 100 years went to work on a federally funded road or whatever,
Right.
Well, first of all, a lot of that, they didn't have a choice. It's not like they, would have been better off if they would be more authentic if they'd have not used roads or whatever. I mean, just because this organization, the federal government, forces its wares on you, you see how it could be a self-perpetuating thing. We're going to force you to use our roads, we're going to force you to use our food, we're going to force you to use whatever, and then when you try to keep what's yours, whoa. We gave you the roads and we gave you the education, so now, it's kind of an indentured servanthood, and that's not really fair.
Well,
it's like these...
We made the government to serve us. We're not... it's the federal government are not aliens that came and enslaved
I'm not
humanity.
Sure
not sure. Do you have lizard people crowd in your viewership?
Who knows? We haven't ruled that one out.
We want to spread open arms, but so anyone that has any authority, maybe I should just ask you, what level of authority do you accept?
I think that authority is something you submit yourself to.
Mm-hmm.
And so, ideally, and not ideally sort of pie in the sky, but just ideal as a good starting point, is that government should proceed from voluntary interactions. So, for instance, a neighborhood, you can get together and say, hey, look, this is what, I think we should do, or whatever, let's pool our resources. I guess when you don't have the right to opt in or opt out, that coercive origin of governments, I think that's something we've passed. Because, the idea that, well, it's your government, you were born in America, and so, that's the rule, but you don't know how the rule came about, you don't know how to change it, you have no influence over it, and you don't like it. That to me just seems deeply unjust.
I don't know anything about Rousseau, I think. Sorry, no. Was it
social contract and all that?
Right, but...
he's at the root of the problem, really, or definitely.
Well, none of us are born free, I don't know. Freedom in the sense that you and I toss the word around. I think, and I'm going to open up a whole can of worms, but it's related to the idea that white boys are the only ones that ever fantasize about time traveling. You know, because any point in history that we go to, we can probably find some circumstances in which we would be top dog. And no one else has ever tasted, I mean, very few other people, statistically at various times of history, have ever tasted any kind of morsel of freedom. And I say that we're only as free, and somebody else said this, no one's free until everybody's free.